All right, I think we are basically live here. Looks like everything's okay. And if you haven't been on one of our live streams before, my name's Glen Morgan. This is We the Govern. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is 2 days before Thanksgiving, and probably I would expect not a huge turnout tonight, as people are probably taking, this is one of those weeks where people are probably on vacation. This is but for those who decided to be hardcore political junkies, or you want to ask questions, this is a good time to jump on. And hopefully I will do my best to answer your questions as we go forward. Just a quick reminder for those of you who haven't seen how this works before. If you ask a question, this is essentially what it looks like on my screen. You can kind of see down below, and I ask that you put the @WeTheGovern there as the questions start to add up, and it looks like we're just getting started, so you don't really see much there right now. But inevitably, towards the end of the show, what ends up happening is the questions start coming in, and I do try to get to every question that people will ask, or at least as many of them as I can get to. And I try to do it roughly in the order in which people ask them. I'm not trying to skip any questions. I'm trying to get to any questions that you have. No guarantees I have an answer there for you, but I'm going to do my best. And but that's what I'm looking at. And so it's easier when you do We the Govern if you're actually having a question. That way, if you're just interacting with other people, other commenters on the site, that's fine. But that just kind of gets us started. I always try to start these a couple minutes early just because I want to be always up and running at the time that I say I'm going to do it. So we are technically a couple minutes early right now. One thing I did promise, and I've actually failed to deliver on today, is I usually try to provide outlines of any place I'm going to be speaking in the next month or so. And since this is Thanksgiving weekend, I don't really have any plans in the next week. I do believe that I've got at least one event that I'm doing here in December, might be a couple of them. I definitely have a whole bunch starting in January, so there's a lot going on there. If any of you are going to the Roanoke Conference essentially that last weekend in January, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Please make a point of coming up and talking to me. I'm a big fan of Roanoke Conference, especially as an opportunity to network and meet other activists and other concerned, more conservative sort of folk from around the state. It's a great place, 600 some odd people all in one place at one time. Doesn't happen often enough in Washington, and so I think that's a great time out at Ocean Shores, and I look forward to seeing people who are going to be able to see you out there. And somebody there says that you're having a hard time hearing me. My soundboard here tells me everything's good, so I'm assuming that it is good, but if there is somebody else here that can't hear me, please let me know. If there's a technical problem, I can try to jump in and fix it, but my soundboard indicates there isn't, so it might be your computer. It might be what you're seeing there. So let's just jump into some of the first questions that people have here. And by the way, if you were at the Clarkston Doge Washington training last week, thank you for coming. It was good to see a bunch of people. It's not a part of the state I get to as often as I should. It was fun to be out there, and I actually took a couple days and went out to visit my son, who's going to college in Bozeman at Montana State University. So it was a fun weekend for me. But it was great to do a Doge Washington training out there in Eastern Washington. And I will be inevitably coming back. I know I've got a couple of events coming up in Spokane next, believe mostly those are going to be in January, but there is a lot more activity than you think coming up over the winter months. A lot of times this is the time when a lot of activists are regrouping. People start getting together and have planning sessions for candidate recruitment or legislative session preparation, whatever it is that you're focused on. And I find myself helping quite a few different people, or at least strategizing with a lot of them on what they're trying to do coming up. So let's just jump into a couple of basic questions that some people have had here. Let me switch over here, and I want to start getting these before I get away from me. And do let me know if there's anybody else who's having problems with, okay, you can hear me, that's good. Let's just jump in here. First question here from NinjaBot, 7945. And is there anyone with pull who would be worth contacting in D.C. about the things happening here? Or are we already on the radar and should exercise some non-complacent patience? Well, listen, I always think if you believe there's somebody you can contact in D.C., I always think the more people that contact them, the better. Obviously, some of us do contact a variety of people back there on a fairly regular basis. Under this current administration, there's actually some people that do care about Washington State. I don't think Washington State's the primary focus of any of the major political battles that are going on right now. The one exception to that may be the voter integrity issue as the lawsuit gets filed by the Department of Justice against Washington State Secretary of State. I kind of wasn't thinking about this being Thanksgiving weekend, so my anticipation is that that would maybe happen next week, but we'll see. But then also I would expect the EBT card issue, because I've titled this video about how the national investigations do impact Washington State. One of them is the EBT card scams that they're uncovering in other states, of which there's massive numbers. And it seems likely to me that even if just some of these stats kind of carry over to Washington, wouldn't surprise me if we have at least 100,000 or more fake EBT accounts or non-compliant EBT accounts where they're essentially just set up where, that they'd be in violation of federal law. Probably quite a few Medicare cases as well. Medicaid cases most likely, and other types of fraud. If you saw the investigation that I believe Chris Rufo was involved in, who, by the way, is from Washington State, into the Somali community fraud operation where they were funding terrorist groups overseas using public kind of scams where they're stealing tax dollars essentially and then sending those over to support terrorist groups overseas, that came out of the kind of the Somali community, which is in Minnesota, which they have a large one. I would anticipate we probably have some like that here in Washington, probably more on the Puget Sound side of things in maybe the Seattle area or just south of Seattle. I don't know how big it is. It's probably not quite as big as what they have uncovered in Minnesota. But, who knows? It's not like anybody in Washington State government's looking, so you can guarantee the Attorney General's office here is useless and that most law enforcement are hamstringed in our state and are told to look the other way if they look anywhere. So it's likely that the feds have the opportunity to uncover quite a bit. Listen, this is one of the downsides to declaring yourself a sanctuary state for illegal violent criminals and illegal aliens and making yourself attractive to drug cartels and other transnational kind of international crime rings. And when you do that, you're inevitably going to attract them to come in. If you say, please come here, they will come. And there's nobody that the Democrats have done more work to invite in than violent illegal criminals from overseas. So I think it's still good, though, to reach out and to let them know, no matter who it is you know in D.C., the more people that find out, I think that's good. There's next question here. This is from Tom Deneen, 1615, I think. How are you feeling? I think that's the question. Well, today I'm feeling pretty good. I think there was a couple days, a couple weeks ago, where I had a cold or something, and so I was hacking up along. I still did the live stream. Fortunately, nothing contagious, but it was kind of funny at that time. So thank you for asking. I feel fine. Let's see. Here's another question here. Lancelot Dufresne. My questions are endless. Not sure if anyone can truly answer them, but Glen's a warrior. Well, thank you so much for those kind words. And you can ask as many questions as you want, and I'll do my best to answer them. Next question here from Lancelot Dufresne. So here's your actual question. Will we possibly see changes from this administration in our state? And I would say yes, but I'm going to tell you where I think probably the most significant changes are going to come from. That activities in D.C. tend to influence what goes on in Washington State. So I would say number one would be the voter roll issues, possibly sort of unrelated to this federal administration, but related to a Supreme Court case that's coming up that they've agreed to hear that would be resolved in time to affect the midterm elections next year, which would be the mail-in voting counting, or counting ballots, I should say, after Election Day. If that case if the Supreme Court rules that you have to have all the ballots counted on Election Day, that doesn't end mail-in voting, but it completely changes the system of mail-in voting that we have in our state right now. Of course, that assumes that there's anybody in our state government that would follow federal law or Supreme Court decisions. And that obviously is a secondary sort of issue, but so that's the voting role and the voting system kind of question. I do think that's going to be impacted in the state. Any impact on that generally in an effort to restore some level of integrity is a positive thing for Washington State. The EBT card scam investigation / Medicaid, Medicare sort of scams, even just the investigations into the COVID pandemic scams that were going on, a lot of that stuff ends up directly affecting federal monies that flow into Washington. A lot of times, this was something I discovered over 10 years ago when I was doing an investigation based on 2 whistleblowers in Washington State out of the DSHS office and their fraud investigation unit. I don't remember what the specific term of that unit, what name for the unit was, but it was basically the people that go and investigate fraud. And one of the things I found out that is that every dollar of fraud that's uncovered by states' fraud detection department or their investigations. And remember, in order for a state to receive federal funds for a lot of these programs, mostly Medicaid, Medicare, and food stamps, there's some other programs, so those are the main ones. In order for the state to be the administrator of those programs, the state has to show that they have a department that investigates fraud, because fraud goes hand in hand with government programs. It always has. So, however, what I never realized is that, let's just say they uncover $1 million worth of fraud in a given calendar year. What the feds do is they cut the amount of money that they send to the state the next year directly by the amount of money of fraud that's uncovered the year before. So the problem then becomes that this creates a very perverse incentive for the bureaucracy within each state to basically not look too hard for fraud, because every dollar of fraud they find, it reduces their budget coming in. Put yourself in the mind of a bureaucrat. Bureaucrats view their position for money, power, and control directly related to how many people they can service as clients. They don't care one microscopic amount about the fact they might be wasting tax dollars, but they do care about the potential risk of those dollars sort of dropping beyond what they would normally be spending. And when that happens, they go into panic mode because they think their jobs could be cut, or their power could be cut, or how much they're getting paid could be cut. So I've seen this time and time again. However, I just had never really realized this perverse incentive that was built into federal law. When they find a dollar, then they remove a dollar. Well, imagine if they uncover, they being the feds, because the state will never do it. If the feds come in and they find out that 10% or 5, who knows, but 10% is a pretty realistic number of all the EBT card expenses were fake over the last, say, 4 or 5 years. And they decide, okay, we're going to cut that down and we're not going to give you another $80 million this next month, or a couple $100 million, whatever it is. That has a direct impact on the state's bureaucracy. Typically, when that happens, the state doesn't actually have probably a big enough budget itself to flood in and backfill in that amount of cut from the federal level. But that's why those investigations would absolutely have direct impact here. The other federal investigations that are going on right now that would have a direct impact on Washington State, one of them is the commercial driver's license scams, where they've uncovered thousands of fake commercial driver's licenses or illegal commercial driver's licenses that have been handed out all over the country. This is really an ongoing scandal that every week or two you're just seeing larger and larger numbers of exposure as it comes to just complete disaster that this has become. And Washington State is absolutely in the epicenter of this. It does appear to me that Washington State hasn't, because of our size, apparently, we just haven't distributed as many fake commercial driver's licenses as, say, California, New York, or Illinois, maybe. But we've done our fair share. The stories I've done already about this. In addition to the commercial drivers, or the Department of Licensing, Washington State Department of Licensing registering non-U.S. citizens to vote, is they've also apparently been just handing out commercial driver's licenses willy-nilly to non-U.S. citizens, and or allowing fraudulent test taking or test evaluations that simply allow people to pretend like they're qualified and they're just giving it out without asking any questions, and they don't care if they can speak English or where they're from originally. That's a problem. That's going to impact us here. The other thing that I would say the feds have already impacted in a good way is that they stopped the scam of trying to take out the dams in Washington state. The Greenies were trying to do that a little while ago in order to ensure that we would have widespread blackouts and super expensive power. The Enviros were trying to take out the lower Snake River dams, and that idea is completely dead now. It's actually absurd that the Biden administration even let it go as far as they did, but nevertheless, that idea is dead. That's not going to happen. The other thing is I would expect federal timber policy to be impacted in Washington state, and possibly, it's not a well-known fact, but there are some significant mineral deposits, and in light of this administration's kind of emphasis on allowing more mining to go on, it could be true, especially there's that big, huge copper deposit just outside of Lewis County. It's the second largest copper deposit that's been tested and identified in North America. And I could see maybe the feds fast-tracking that mine to get it up and running, which would be a big deal if you lived in, especially in Lewis County, more than anything else. So anyway, those are a couple things, not the only things. I think the feds shifting their focus from the southern border to the northern border because British Columbia has become the epicenter of Mexican drug cartels and South American drug cartels to import both people, so human trafficking, but also drug smuggling to come down to the northern border in Washington state. That does seem to be happening at a much greater increased tempo than it has in the past, with the southern border being shut off inevitably. That's where it's going. That's why you're seeing a lot of the feds major busts actually on huge trafficking operations in Washington state. Not just Western Washington, but Eastern Washington too. That's why you're seeing, I think, a lot more of that going on right now. Let's see. Let me know if you guys are having any trouble with hearing anything. Like I said, my soundboard makes it look like I'm okay here, but let me know. I saw somebody made a comment about that there. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot. Let me try to catch up to where we are here. So you're saying that there's a problem with the sound. Let's see if I can improve that a little bit. I'm hoping that I've got this in the right place. So I do have an overhead mic, boom mic, and usually it's pretty good at picking up sound. So if you're having a problem with that, that's surprising to me a little bit because historically I've had a pretty good situation. Bright Light 8817 here. Here's the question. Where was Bob during his taxpayer-funded vacation? Great question. We don't have the answer for that yet. There are records requests out there pending. So once we get the answer to that, I'm sure you'll hear about it. I do need to talk to some other people that have also filed those records requests. They might have filed them sooner, and this is more about trying to coordinate with all of them. Let's see where we go from here. Somebody here mentioned Ferguson's just going to keep on Inslee's direction. This is Cephurius 5555. They can investigate Washington all they want. Ferguson's just going to keep on Inslee's direction. I'm assuming following Inslee's direction there. I gave up and left the state as soon as my hometown of Spokane started looking like Seattle, and I left. Okay, yeah, no, Spokane definitely following the track, just like Boise is, actually. In fact, I'd say Boise is might be ahead of Spokane in some ways. They're going to be going down that same disaster zone. Laramie appears to be headed that way. So does Bozeman, Billings, and Missoula. So I don't really care where you left. If you left a city and you moved to another one, you're going to be seeing similar circumstances, even if it's in a red state. It's probably a little bit better in a red state, but not that much, and you aren't that far ahead. Because, of course, what's happening is dumb, bad ideas out of blue areas just simply spread to the others. You'll never be able to run away from it. You might get a little bit of a benefit for a couple years, but that's about it. So that's why we have to defeat it. And it's not as simple or as easy as people think. If you defeat it in Washington, you save Idaho. If we don't, Idaho's done, so are the Dakotas, and so is Montana. But if we do, we may be able to start pushing back in a lot more places than just here. And it would help us if the feds just keep heading in that direction and keep cutting federal government down and start changing some things. I was very happy to see some of the changes that were being made at the EPA level of eliminating some of the fines. If some of you were aware of the Sackett case from back in the day out of Coeur d'Alene, that federal case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was really based on the EPA just going crazy with these $37,000 daily fines that they were issuing to that family. And it was kind of amazing how insane it was. And it's good to see that they're attempting to remove all of that garbage out of the federal government right now. Annie C5924, do you think that the federal government will finally take a look at Washington and OSPI for allowing transgender boys in girls' sports? The answer to that is yes, sort of, but I mean, we're not the only ones that they're having to deal with this on. I believe Maine, Minnesota, obviously New York, California, and Oregon, and Colorado, and Minnesota, and New Jersey, if I remember right. There's a variety of states that they're having to deal with this on. Illinois, of course. Was it New Hampshire, or was it, I think it was Vermont. Anyway, there's Rhode Island, Connecticut, a number of these states. This is kind of a fight across the country, not everywhere. You're seeing some places that claim to be red states that are having this problem because, of course, it's just part of this crazy ideology that the left's been pushing for a while. And I do think that we'll just be one of those states. I actually think it's a good idea that the feds are shutting down the Federal Department of Education. You saw Senator Murray, Washington State Senator Murray, back in D.C. complain and claim that it's illegal to shut it down and all this stuff. But they do seem to be on this path again to shut down the Federal Department of Education. Obviously, nobody has done more to promote private education and homeschooling than Chris Reichel, who is Washington State's Office Superintendent of Public Instruction, as a complete clown almost. In fact, he's almost become like a caricature of why you'll never send your kids to public school if they're young right now. You have time to change the direction. Chris Reichel's become Exhibit A, just completely insane. And that's going to make it easier. I saw a video, Brandy Cruz actually posted this just recently, of the Tumwater girl who's been standing up and kind of pushing back against boys in girls' sports. And a quick reminder, if you're not aware, in case you've been living underneath a rock, the Let's Go Washington people have had these initiatives out there. They're collecting large numbers of them. When I checked in, it was over a month and a half ago, they were already halfway done with the signature gathering. So they've been on a tremendous momentum, and if you haven't signed it yet, please do so wherever you can. They might have mailed it to you even, and whatever way you can get those things signed, sign up everybody send it back to them, give them a chance to fight. Even if you don't want to fight, even if your friends and neighbors are apathetic and they already gave up 5 decades ago, just get them to sign anyway, and let the people who actually want to change things and fix it, let them continue this fight. And the Let's Go Washington people have been doing a great job. I actually saw them collecting signatures late at night as I was coming through Cle Elum, and I was at Safeway, and they were still busy table collecting signatures in Cle Elum. So anyway, that's good. It's good to see that, and I suspect that that'll be the big fight that's coming up. Let's see. I'm trying to. There is a comment here. It's not a question, but I'll mention this anyway. This is Cephirius 5555. It's not like the Supreme Court ever enforces their rulings in the first place. That is true. In order to do that, you have to have the Department of Justice enforce it. And but I'll tell you what, at this point in time, I would anticipate the Department of Justice does. But we'll see. One of the things, Harmeet Dillon in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which means they're the ones that are going to be coming after schools that abuse First Amendment rights or that push DEI or also voter integrity issues. My experience with her has been very positive over the years. I would anticipate she takes it pretty seriously, and I couldn't think of actually a better person ready to go to push back on some of the stuff. Another question here, Brightlight 8817. I think I already answered this one, but where was Bob during his taxpayer-funded vacation? And we don't know. At least we don't know for sure yet, so we will find out soon. let's see. I don't know. I'm trying to get questions here. Here's a question. OBT woke Nobi. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it's Obi Woke Kenobi, I suppose. 458. What's going on with Oregon statewide drive for signatures to remove governor's cruel tax increase? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Oregon has some different laws than we do in Washington, but that's been a big move down there. And the Oregon state Republicans seem to have woken up in their own way. I don't mean that in a woke way, but in a real way. They seem to have actually woken up and decided that they want to go out and collect signatures to push back on a tax increase. And Oregon doesn't have the scam that Washington state recently put in a number of years ago, where the AG is allowed to come in and game and put their thumbs on the scale and create fake statements saying that if you pass this tax cut or you repeal the tax cut, that children will die, it's the end of the world, and all the other stuff that they always do on it. That's what hurt the Let's Go Washington effort with the tax repeals. Until those ballot statement issues are changed, it makes it very difficult to run a tax repeal in Washington. But Oregon, you can still do that, and that's what they're doing. I think it's a great idea. It's good to see the Republicans actually try to go out and do something, and we will see where it goes. DAB sticks. I wish Washington could figure it out. I wish it was different. $5 gas. What a joke. Yeah, and I don't know where you're going for $5 gas, because I haven't paid more even in Washington State. And listen, I just drove to Montana and back, and I can tell you it's definitely less expensive in Montana. Absolutely. But it was about 75 cents difference that I saw. But for me, the last month or so, I mean, I've been paying $3, and usually it's the high threes somewhere. Is it still too high? Of course. I'm never going to justify the stupidity of the taxes that Washington State puts on gas, especially since we should be one of the states that has actually a much lower fuel cost, considering proximity to the refineries and the oil coming out of Alaska. But nevertheless, let's talk about the fact that it's not 5, though. I don't see it that high here right now. It is too high, especially the CCA scam, which is a Climate Commitment Act wholesale scam cost on taxes. Okay. I like this. Somebody said, hey, I'm going to watch this later. Dinner time. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, that's fine. No problem. If you're watching this and it's after hours and you want me to try to answer a question, but obviously you will have missed the live stream, feel free to enter those questions in down below. You wouldn't be alone. I do get a lot of those questions over time. I do try to go back and pay attention to anybody that puts comments or questions on any of the YouTube videos that I have. If you saw I did a little short video recently. I just happened to be driving by the Stonehenge, the full-size Stonehenge down there that Sam Hill built about 100 years ago down in Washington near Goldendale, kind of overlooking the river. And it's just a beautiful sight. I went there when I was a kid many times. And I was driving by, and I was on my way out to do this Doge training class, and I saw it right there. And so I kind of impulsively stopped by and just did a little quick short video. I'm experimenting with this a little bit because I do drive around Washington State a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of things about Washington that most people don't know. It's amazing how even people who've lived here their whole lives, sometimes they just take it for granted. Or if you just moved here, you might have just limited your life experience to a fairly small area around where you live. And you're unaware of kind of the amazing history and the amazing place that Washington State actually is. Yes, we have complete idiots and clowns and crooks in government. We have a horrible political class and the bureaucracy that they have built. There's nothing very few good things you can say about them or what they've done. That's the whole point of trying to fix and change what's going on and elect different people. Why do you think we've been spending a lot of time trying to go back and fix the problems of the voter rolls? There's all kinds of other issues, but the state itself is amazing if you spend the time to look around, especially if you've traveled around this country a lot, which I have in the past, because I had jobs before I became a full-time activist again. And I used to travel a lot around America. And I lived in New York City when I was a college student and had a chance because I was on running teams. I traveled all over the East Coast. And I love history and I love visiting the museums, and every place has its own charm and things that are interesting to visit. But in the end, and especially backpacking when I did younger, and I was backpacking around the world then a little bit, I got I really developed a much greater appreciation for Washington State, and I love the state. It's why I'm trying to keep working on fixing a lot of problems that are out there. Next question that I have here on the list, and I don't believe I've missed anybody's question, but there are a lot of comments and questions now, guys. So again, it makes it a little bit easier for me to find it if you do the @We the Govern. This next question is from Michael Case, 8231, with A.G. Brown talking about going to war with Trump over the defunding of HUD affecting Washington continuum of care program. Does that allow the feds to dig into the legality of the program? Well, sure, but I mean, at a certain point, they can cut off the money if they want to. So if your state, and believe me, Washington State is a clown show of stupidity and incompetence when it comes to how our bureaucrats operate everything that they administer in the state. So it doesn't mean that every single bureaucrat or person that works in these in DSHS or whatever other department that they're in, it doesn't mean that every single one of them is a crook and a criminal. I know that. But there's a shocking percentage of them that clearly are. And the incompetence level is very, very, they're incredibly incompetent most of the time. Sloppy, lazy, incompetent, and bad. So there's a lot of rules for administering federal funds. So if the feds bother to look more than skin deep at many of our federally administered programs in our state, they can easily find plenty of reasons to cut off funding to Washington State. And I'd argue that we deserve that funding cutoff in most of these programs. And so A.G. Brown may be angry and jumping around and wish he was back on that island when he was a Survivor contestant back in 2001. But the reality is there is almost nothing he can do to stop that. Now, there's other cases from bigger states and more intense battles that are probably going to lay the political foundation for whatever happens in Washington State. Because let's face it, in comparison to Illinois, New York, or California, Washington State's like this little pipsqueak. It's the mini-me of these other states in comparison. So Nick Brown may think he's important, but nobody in D.C. thinks he is. And it's unlikely that he's going to, but again, it sounds good to his fundraisers. And you got to think, who is he appealing to? He's appealing to whatever that Democrat kind of Trump derangement syndrome sort of people. They expect to hear, if you're a Democrat, you really don't have to think for yourself or do anything interesting or accomplish anything. You just simply have to say Trump, Trump, Trump all the time, Orange Man bad, and that's pretty much the entire political philosophy and battle plan of every Democrat that's elected in Washington State right now, for the most part. Obviously, it's kind of mixed in with a little bit of corruption. How much can I steal from myself and my friends? But that is what happens. Barry Electronics, your question is, Seattle working with ICE? Or can we expect military intervention? Well, the answer to the first one's obvious. Seattle's absolutely not working with ICE at all. Seattle might be working with the Sinaloa drug cartel, and they're probably much closer to that, but they aren't working with ICE, not at all. But I wouldn't expect military intervention, and this is an interesting thing. Portland generated a much more intensive response from the feds than Seattle ever did. Both Portland and Seattle were doubling down on dumb in their resistance to ICE. But what's interesting is that what it appears to me that's gone on in Washington State is that you have these Democrats and these people in these positions that they talk up a big game like they're going to resist ICE. But based on the deportation flights coming out of Boeing Field and the numbers that we see, ICE has quadrupled and tenfold increased their deportation flights coming out of Washington State. And they complain about it, right? They sell whistles. I saw the story out of Vancouver, actually. They're selling whistles, so you can whistle if you see an ice baby, whistles or something. But I don't, they're not going to cooperate, but it's not like ICE is asking for permission, and I don't see the Border Patrol asking for permission. They're definitely digging into some of this stuff. This is a question here from Jimmy Hoyt, 729, Lincoln County copper. No, what I'm talking about is it's actually Yakima copper. There's a large copper deposit that was discovered actually in the 70s. Just the access it, you go through Lewis County. So it's right on the border of Lewis County and Yakima County, but the actual mine concession would be in Yakima County. And what really prevented it from ever being opened initially as a mine was when Mount St. Helens blew up, and then the commodity crash over the next couple times over the next couple years. But at this point in time, that's a commercially viable operation there, provided they could get government support for it. And that's what I'm really referring to when I talk about the copper deposit. It is a massive copper deposit. It's also molybdenum and gold, but copper would be the primary justification for having the mine move ahead. Let's see. This is Lancelot Dufresne. Does state tax law have any accountability for infrastructure neglect? Tax law. No, not that I'm aware of. I'm not even sure what you mean by that, actually. So maybe you should ask another question here that clarifies this. State tax law doesn't really address infrastructure neglect. And if you notice, for the most part, especially at the state level, they're absolutely not going to have any kind of accountability for infrastructure neglect, because if that was the case, almost every single school superintendent in Washington State would be in prison, since one of their common schemes is to willfully and with malicious intent not maintain the buildings that they have so they can justify building. They can let it decay and then eventually reach the point where it's unhealthy, and then use that as their justification to run a new bond to build a new building rather than maintain the buildings they have. The same thing that Thurston County employees and administration actively did with willful and malicious intent with the Thurston County Courthouse, is in a way to justify why they want to build and expand their Taj Mahal operations. They love debt as long as you're paying for it, and what they really want is fancy offices, new digs, and making you pay for it. And one of the ways that they typically have done that is they let the buildings decay purposely, don't fix the roof, let water leak for a decade or so, build up some mold, say that it's unhealthy, which it is at that point in time, and then that's their excuse for why they want to get out of it. They do it all the time. And don't think because you live in Eastern Washington it's any different, or Idaho. We've seen this game. It's repeated over and over again. Everybody knows it. One of the signs of a well-run, as rare as it is to find, a well-run local government would be that they maintain their facilities and they pay attention to maintenance. Years ago, when I was talking to, it was a former Lacey city manager who retired, who I thought was a pretty good guy. And I asked him once, what's the single leading indicator that you would look at when you go into a city or a county maybe to see if they've got financial trouble? Like, it hasn't hit yet, but it's coming. And he said quality of the roads, because he said that's one of the easiest things. You can start cutting back on road maintenance and other things first, because it's something that people notice the least, and it doesn't generate, it takes a while for it to generate a lot of resistance. And so when elected officials are cutting money so they can throw them into stupid pet projects or waste it on some malinvestment garbage operation, right? They pull it out of these maintenance departments, and then you can see the decay takes years. They figure by the time the decay really sets in, that person who made the decision, they're long gone into their next sweetheart job, and it's no longer their problem, and they can blame the next guy. And that is how government operates, actually. Here's a question. Amy Lorenz, 9688. Why can't Eastern Washington succeed from Western Washington and all its taxes and politics? Well, so there's two different things that we've gone down the road on this before. The Liberty State movement in Eastern Washington, if you look at what's going on in Oregon, Eastern Oregon has kind of a similar movement. The Liberty State movement originally in Eastern Washington was more about separating and creating a new state. In order to create a new state, you absolutely do have to have Congress involved. And unless the Republicans just have a miracle where they really prevail for a decade in getting all kinds of supermajority in D.C., or at least a large majority in the House and a pretty substantial majority in the Senate, I can't see that you would get the federal support for new states to be created. One of the things that you'd have to have, like, this is just period, it's not even really relevant to the significance of Liberty State, that design in the first place, which is essentially the 20 counties of Eastern Washington. But one of the problems is that there's compromise that would end up happening in D.C. So, for example, and this is going back to like the free state, slave state arguments that you saw back in the 1840s and 50s, where basically they would approve a new state to come in that was a free state and then a new state that was a slave state to balance each other out politically in the federal Senate. And it's all about money, power and control, essentially. Those are the three things that drive decisions politically. And so with a new state like this, the state of Liberty, that would definitely be a Republican voting state. It would be bigger than some states and relatively small population, but it would be considered a fairly Republican state. So the Democrats in D.C. would move heaven and hell to try to prevent that from happening, unless you could say, oh, well, then we'll make Puerto Rico a state, right? Or something like that. And so generally, those are the kind of fights that are going on. The reason, obviously, why you have movements in Illinois and why you have movements in upstate New York, why you have movements in Oregon and Washington and California about these breakaway sort of boundaries purely has to do with political abuse by the Democrats. They get in charge in the state, concentrated in urban enclaves, and then they abuse the rural residents who don't have any cultural affinity or common interests with those people in those blue states. I mean, talk to somebody from Northern California or Eastern Oregon, same problem. And so the movements have always been about how do we separate ourselves from those abusive tax and ridiculous policies that they have. And you obviously still have to have some sort of an economic support system that would support your new state moving forward, which actually the state of Liberty does. They've even talked about combining Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington. That's one way of doing it. Or Eastern Oregon now, if you look at what the counties have been approving, they would like to join Idaho. But it requires the state legislature to approve it, which, little secret here, the Democrats are never going to abandon their ability to control areas that they control right now. They just never will. Same reason why when Eastern King County and Eastern Snohomish and Eastern Pierce and Eastern Whatcom County were trying to break away from their county, try to break up into multiple counties, and which is way easier than trying to break a state up or secede from one state to another. That would never was allowed to happen. There's no real process to do it. It requires the state legislature to agree on that. And because you have enough Democrats in the state legislature, they're going to stop it. Even if Republicans controlled the state legislature, they would need to have pretty close to, they would need to have an obvious majority, and they'd have to control the governor's office in order to allow something like that to happen. In which case, the movement tends to die if it's avoiding the political abuse that you're getting out of Seattle. So anyway, that's, I don't know if I'm really properly answering that question, and I don't think I skipped over any questions there, so let's keep going. Let's see. Yep, Spokane is terrible now. I saw that question from Dab Sticks. Yes, you've elected Lisa Brown. She is egregiously incompetent, thoroughly corrupt to her soul. Everyone around her is completely corrupt. It's all about squandering and wasting your money. They don't care that they're destroying the city. They just are looking for power, money, and control. She was former head of the Department of Commerce. She knew how to bribe her way into a mayor's seat in Spokane when she got elected. And the Republicans have been either asleep at the switch out there or generally so unorganized that their ability to push back with an effective, they're playing, tag football or something, or taking crayons to a knife fight. And that's typically how Republicans have operated, and that's why they're having problems in Spokane. They don't seem to recognize the significance of the fight they're in. Jack Palder, 1522, do you not think it's ironic that we distrust the government yet are hoping that the feds will fix our government? No, I think it's incredibly ironic. I've mostly spent most of my political efforts in life trying to divorce the feds from any kind of federalism, in particular trying to support federalism, even with an abusive state, because the feds are usually worse. This is a unique situation right now where the feds actually, at least they're in some cases, trying to do things that are less abusive than the state is, and the state is trying to abuse us even more. So it's incredibly ironic. I don't particularly like federal intervention at any level generally, but if we can get it at least to fix some of the corruption in our voting systems, and at least as a start, that would be a great place to start. I think if we did that, I think we'd have a lot more momentum to fix other things moving forward. I also think that the feds have to take the next census a lot more seriously than they did last time. Again, the Trump administration was here during the last census effort, and they really botched it. They really did. I mean, if you look back on it, there were a lot of games. In fact, I should do a video on this about the math. Sorry, I said meth, but I meant math. The math approach and the formulas that the partisan administrators of the census operation did last time that shifted dishonestly a number of congressional seats around just by formulaic implementation. And that would have netted out probably 8 more Republican seats in Congress than what they have now out of just fraud, just simple fraud, just faking it and falsifying the data. I think that, again, Republicans have been asleep at the switch. They usually aren't aware of this stuff, or they want to play nice and pretend like everything's nonpartisan. And the Democrats are going to cheat, lie, and steal in all these cases, mostly out of desperation, because the truth is, outside of massive illegal importation of people, they see themselves losing the demographic fight in America for political power. And again, to them, that's the only thing that matters. Like, you're not going to see the Democrats, at least not that I've seen lately. They don't want to shift their policy positions. By the way, you did see them do that in the 90s. There's no doubt, and I think it's ignorant to pretend like this didn't happen, but when Clinton came in, there's no doubt he tried to position himself to be more conservative than any Democrat that had run for office in 20 years. No doubt about that. That is how he positioned himself, and it was greatly credited, even though it may have been a lie. It was still what he pushed himself and defined himself as. And the Democrats, weirdly enough, now just don't think they need to do that, or they don't like that idea. So that's why you see that all of this sort of the games that are going on right now from the left is mostly one of desperation, because they're losing. If you deport, and supposedly the feds claim that they've removed either through active deportation or self-deportation 2.3 million or more illegals in the last 9-10 months. That's a big deal. It really is. If you keep that momentum up, and it doesn't look like they're planning to keep it up. They plan on accelerating, increasing that momentum. From a political power standpoint, assuming there's any rules left, the Democrats would view that as a very negative thing. And they do. Look at that. That's their entire political campaign. The concern I have is that the feds lose momentum on Doge. You've been hearing stories about is Doge dead, and I understand the arguments about how they've implemented it more directly into these departments. But I'm also looking at the October deficit numbers that look terrible to me, and so the feds are still spending too much money, despite now that may be a little artificially set because of the cost of the shutdown / the final payouts on 200,000 federal workers that aren't working anymore, but they had pay that continued for a number of months. So maybe if we see a sharp decline in November and December, maybe that'll be different. But one of the things they have to get under control is shrinking the size of the federal government. Reducing it by 200,000 federal workers is a good start, but it's not enough. They have to keep grinding away. Finding billions and billions of dollars of fraud, it's a good start, but not enough. They have to keep grinding away on that. So there's a lot more that they need to do. T.Z. Burton here. Oh, this is funny. Somebody said, cut Olympia off from Western Washington. Yeah, you could argue that if you took Seattle out of Washington state and you made Seattle its own state, the rest of the state would be about as more conservative than Texas. So I'm going to point that out. That's kind of an interesting thing. T.Z. Burton, Pam Bondi just appointed Neil Floyd to Western District Federal Court, and we have Pete in the East. Will they get blue slipped? And the answer is probably yes. Whether that blue slip matters is a separate story, because there's inevitably going to come to head. And blue slipping is where the federal senators, it's not in the law. It's really more of a prerogative that's been given to federal senators, where they have the ability to intervene and say, no, I don't want this person to be the district or the DOJ appointed attorney from the various offices in my state. I don't like them, or I think they're bad, or whatever. And so we have two of them, one out of Spokane, which is Pete Serrano that you mentioned there earlier, and one out of Seattle, which is the Neil Floyd, who was a immigration judge that recently was appointed there to the Department of Justice office out of Seattle. And I don't know. Neil Floyd might be able to get through. Pete Serrano, the Democrats are going to lobby hard to make sure he doesn't get appointed if they can help it. Right now, this is an interim appointment, so I don't know what will happen to him for sure. But they don't want him to build up a political resume, because remember, he ran against Nick Brown for the AG's office already once. And he's built up some history of litigation against the state of Washington with the Silent Majority Foundation. So there's a lot going on there. Red states do have Democrat judges, so we can't. Why can't we have conservatives? Well, it's because the Democrats are smarter than the idiot Republicans that are in those red states. People may think that they're electing Republicans in those red states, but look at the behavior of a lot of those politicians once they get to D.C. and they're elected from safe red districts. Most of the time, the voters where they come from think they're voting for a Republican, and they go back and they're worse than a Democrat when they get to D.C. We see this happen a lot. So that's why you see what's going on. But that was a good question, T.Z. Burton. Excellent question there. Let's see. I think this is the next question. I'm skipping down through just comments back and forth. Erudite Fuzz, have you talked to Scott Presler at all during his voting integrity campaign here in Washington? I haven't talked to him here. Obviously, I know Scott Presler. He doesn't know me. I mean, he's a much more visible type person. He's very enthusiastic. I love the campaign. He's coming to Washington. I just love having him here, generating that kind of attention. I haven't been able to go to one of the events that he's at. He's a good guy, trying to make a difference. And one of the things is that his voter registration drive is a little weak, sort of, here, because it's almost impossible for you to not get registered to vote in Washington State, whether you want to be or not. If you go get a driver's license, you will be registered to vote. If you visit a DSHS office, you will be registered to vote. If you have almost any interaction with any state agency anywhere, you'll be registered to vote. And so we don't have a problem with people not being registered to vote in Washington. We do have a problem with a lot of people not voting, but that's a different story. We have a bunch of Republicans culturally who would vote probably more conservative, who have chosen through laziness, through apathy, through the never-ending presumption that the rapture's coming tomorrow and that it's impending doom and the Antichrist is all around you. That's been going on for almost 100 years in Washington State, and so that they just decide not to vote, which makes it really hard for the rest of us who would agree with them politically. And then they basically become a self-fulfilling prophecy of every dumb, bad thing that's out there because we don't get their vote. There was a couple of races this cycle. I should do a story on this. There were several local races where the vote difference was like 4 votes or a very small number of votes. I mean, you could have just rolled over and picked up a couple more ballots there and won, and it would make a difference in some of those jurisdictions, and that was really sad to see. Let me go down here. Let's see. Anybody talking about education in here? You're absolutely right. I know the issue that you're dealing with here is absolutely correct. There's been a massive increase in private education in Washington State, and there's no doubt about it. Anybody that thinks there isn't hasn't been paying attention. You have about 51,000 families that pulled their kids out of public school. They haven't all gone homeschooling. A lot of them have gone to private schools, and you've seen an explosive growth in the existing private schools, their population base, and their ability to handle the volume of kids coming in. It's not as much conservative as people might think watching this video or listening to this channel. It's largely the largest number of those parents actually were in the more eastern part of King County, so your Issaquah, North Shore School District, Bellevue School District, Mercer Island, Seattle, places like that where you have huge school districts. wealthy parents, usually professional jobs, a high percentage of them, and they believe math is real, unlike the Democrats and the teaching, the WEA, which is the Washington Education Association. They believe that being literate is actually important, which clearly the WEA and OSPI doesn't. And so when they saw the high cap program, highly capable programs being undermined because the clowns in public education decided that it was racist and that math is racist and teaching and any discipline in school is racist, everything's racist, of course, they just pulled their kids out of public school and they put them into private school because they'll let the leftists go do stupid things to other kids. They're not going to let them do it to their own kids. But that's why you saw the Bellevue School District suddenly have to shut down buildings, get into financial distress. North Shore is having issues. Issaquah even now is starting to have issues. And it's really this outflow of kids that are probably usually better students, and their parents just care about where their kids are going, and because their jobs require them to be skilled in these areas, they realize that they need to lay the foundation for their own kids. The other thing that's kind of interesting, and I think it's underappreciated, the Running Start program, whether you use it in public school or homeschooling or however you want to use it, is actually a great program. 3 of my kids used it to go get advanced math, science, and chemistry classes in the community college. And it was very, very beneficial for them when they moved out, when they graduated, to have that background, because they were never going to get that quality of education in any public school or, frankly, any private school in high school. And they were able to definitely step it up another notch and get much more advanced education that way. Frankly, throwing your kids to the wind and trusting some strangers to do a good job educating your kids is probably not your optimal choice in life. Sometimes you don't have a choice because you're, financially, or your life situation may have put you in a difficult spot, or maybe your skills are bad and you're not able to actually do a good job educating them in a homeschool environment. Or you can't afford private school, I understand. But lack of intervention and involvement in your kid's school and assuming strangers are going to do it for you probably won't produce the optimal results for you. But that's, my kids did go to public school, all 4 of them. My wife teaches in public school, rural school district, but she does teach there. And that's a little bit, that's not the optimal choice, but you can manage it if you really integrate yourself into their education process. I see some people here pulling up. Let's see. There's these aren't questions really, but people are pulling in some things here on prices of gas in where is it? On Highway 395, it's $5.99. That is genuinely just a ripoff. That same gallon of gas is actually $3.87 right now in Thurston County at the Tumwater Costco. So I don't know why you'd be paying $2 more a gallon just because you can. And I was just going through Spokane, and I wasn't anywhere near $5.99. It was far less than that. So I don't know. You're finding some of the worst places, I think, if that's what they're charging there. And this isn't me trying to pretend like I like the stupid gas taxes in our state. It isn't, but I still try to be fairly realistic about what it is. Let's see. Beth Woods 9377. This isn't a question, but I like to comment. We took our initiatives to church, to the neighbors, to the diner. When we went out for lunch, 3 neighbors took copies from us to take to work. I was surprised how many didn't know about it. And that's true. Listen, one of the things, if you're watching, there's 153 people watching right this minute as I'm speaking, supposedly, according to the computer. And there's 712 who have actually watched this video so far. Now, you've self-selected yourself compared to everybody around you with both your interest and your attention and concern about things going on in local government. Otherwise, you wouldn't be wasting your time watching me. So you are unusual. You know more than probably almost anybody around you, at least about what's going on. You could agree or disagree with what I say. You could think I'm wrong. You could maybe just be doing Oppo research to watch this. But for the most part, your knowledge is substantially more detailed, and you're more aware about what's going on in the community. Just like people who listen to talk radio. I remember a few years ago there was a study done to found out, they were a lot more educated about what's going on in their local community. That's not the majority of the population. It's not even really a partisan thing. It's 80% of the population doesn't listen to anything. You're lucky if they know. They barely know who the governor is in the state. They usually know what state they live in. Sometimes they know what county they live in. Most of them will. But after that, it's a descending order of knowledge on a daily basis. Some of them might wake up around election time, but as somebody who's doorbelled thousands of homes, apartments or homes, all over the place, even in places you'd think, how could you possibly not know this is going on? It takes really a lot of work to send that information out there where people would know. This is particularly true if you're going to be sharing information that isn't part of the narrative that's handed out by your government. So the government controls, of course, places like the Seattle Times or Cairo King 5 News or places like that. They're corrupted. They're just mouthpieces for whatever government tells them to do. So those people are clearly going to be they might be a little bit more aware of whatever that story is. And so imagine when you aren't the approved narrative for the political class, which I am definitely not. So for me to get that word out to those people, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. And so I'm only able to impact, the 62,000 some odd people that subscribe to my channel and another another 50,000 or so that watch on a regular basis. So let's just say I'm able to affect about 100,000 people's views, assuming that they're actually watching any significant level. And that's a small subset of that's going to watch a live stream broadcast like this. So, think about what it takes. I would have to be 50 times larger than my channel is today to probably have the kind of equivalent impact. And even then, there's going to be a lot of people that they just watch Netflix or just television. They don't pay any attention. Let's see. I saw somebody mention $3.33 on the res in Eastern Washington. Of course, the res isn't subject to some of the gas taxes, so they are able to drop the price a little bit lower. And let's keep going. Oh boy, there's a lot of questions, guys, and there's a lot here. I'm going to do my best. Jason Fisher, 1530, question, what's your thoughts on construction plans for I-5 bridge, also including light rail? Should I look forward to the return of Elvis before this thing gets built? Yeah, well, one of the things, obviously, I am really opposed to bringing light rail across that bridge from Oregon into Washington. It is fiscally idiotic, and there's no sane reason why anybody in Washington wants that garbage rail system that's bankrupting Oregon. Let them go down with that ship. We don't need to. The only reason they want to bring it across to Washington is to stick it to the Washington taxpayers to pay for a disaster. And frankly, the fact that they've had this bridge design, every variation of it from the CRC last time to the current bridge design now, has been the bad bridge designs usually are bad because of the light rail component. And the feds are probably fairly aware. The price tag on this has been insane and ridiculous and so expensive that everybody's looking at it and figuring what the heck's going on here. So it's very possible the bridge could be totally stopped again because of the stupidity and just obnoxious religious fanaticism of the light rail supporters. And we do need a new bridge. We absolutely do. Frankly, we need a bridge that's twice the size of the current bridge. It shouldn't be just keeping a couple lanes. We should be doubling this. If you're going to waste the time and money to build a big bridge, build it big. Don't go halfway. And that's where we're at. So I don't know if that's answering any questions there. Edward Miller, 3008. Will there ever be an investigation into where all this extra tax dollars has gone collected on the CCA? Yes, there is. Many of us are looking at that. Most of us know it's one big grifting kickback scam. In fact, everyone knows that, including the people who administer it. They're using it to buy friends and influence political donations down the road and to pay off insiders. Think USAID. That's about the closest equivalent you're going to get to what the CCA is now. Now, the CCA is administered by the Commerce Department. which really until Lisa Brown had been Commerce Director, it had been kind of a sleepy department as far as state agencies go. And now it is just one of the most corrupt entities that Washington State's been able to collect together and squander taxpayer dollars on. And now, in particular, with Inslee's push through the CCA scam, the $2 billion or so they've gone that just gets sent out to be wasted on whatever it's being wasted on, this is the gravy train of all gravy trains. When that gets shut down, a lot of lefties are going to lose jobs, and that's a good thing. And I hope it gets shut down soon. Let's see. Looking down here, I'm trying to get to questions, guys. There's a lot of comments, which is great. I'm just finding questions here. Dan Woolette, 5649. Hey, Glenn, is it possible to be an advocate in our House of Representatives here in Washington State? I'd like to sit in and take notes while they are writing these new tax increases. Well, they already wrote the tax increases, so you missed out on most of them. But yes, you can always be there in the state legislature watching, testifying. You can testify at the hearings. You don't even have to go. I mean, nowadays you can remote testify in on those hearings now, which is even easier. If you're in Eastern Washington, I can't tell from what you just said there. So I don't know if you're in Western Washington, it's easier. If you're in Eastern Washington, it's a little bit harder. But yeah, you can go there and observe whatever you want. They'll listen to you, and they probably will if you provide commentary, especially a public comment. But it doesn't, most of what's actually going on to write any legislation, taxes or not, are done by lobbyists and special interests on the inside. And then nonpartisan, I'll put that in air quotes, staff tends to manipulate the language as well. There's a lot of games that get played. Listen, I live near Olympia, and I spent a lot of time working on legislation before. And there's a lot of games that get pushed in there. You'll have a lot of good bills that come out from the Republicans. They'll be proposed. Most of them won't get hearings. The Democrats pretty much cut them out of that. They might give some of them hearings in exchange for some other kickback. But anyway, that's it. So let's jump on here. I don't even know if I answered that question back there properly, so I hope I did. Jeremiah 2911, yo. I loved your Stonehenge video and appreciate your video today regarding arresting video. Yeah, you can arrest your way out of a crime wave. Can you explain to us what most likely will happen if Bob's fraudulent tax millionaires passes? I'm assuming you mean the tax that he would propose. And by the way, thank you for watching that video today. It's interesting. The video that I did, I actually filmed it last night, launched it this morning, and it was a video about, and it's just public policy as it relates to crime and punishment. It's always fascinated me. It's kind of a wonkish thing. It's going back to my college days. I think it was living in New York City and seeing the horrible crime wave, bringing Rudy Giuliani to campus, hearing what he had to say, and then actually watching him be elected, and then watching the largest decrease in violent crime that's ever been recorded in a major American city ever. And it was amazing, and you could genuinely indicate that a lion's share of that impact truly came out of the policies that he implemented there. It's one of the charts that no Democrat wants anybody to see, because here you had this Republican elected in a city that was 15% Republican. And it was amazing the change that he implemented there with the broken windows theory and James Q. Wilson approach to how public safety was taken there and how seriously they took it. I'd argued these issues in a sociology class. I think I mentioned in the video today, but I didn't expect the video that I produced last night to be as long as it was. I'm not working off a teleprompter script or anything. This is just what I'm in it. I can't always be totally certain that I know exactly how long those videos are going to be, and that one ended up being a little bit longer. So I apologize for the length of that video. I wish I should have probably broken it into two parts, but it is what it is. We'll just see where it goes. But if Bob's tax the millionaires, obviously there'll be litigation on it. I kind of think the Democrats are going to be a lot less likely to have more tax increases this session than they were last session because of the blowback that they're already getting. You just saw Microsoft today go public, today or yesterday, where they basically were confronting the Democrats, saying that you're going to lose a lot more jobs than you already have with these tax proposal ideas that you have. If your goal is to chase away all the high-tech jobs you have in the state, you're doing the right thing with tax increases. There's enough Democrats that will listen to that. Obviously not the crazy town people that are elected in Seattle, but a good chunk of these other Democrats are going to listen to that a little bit, especially if their goal isn't to destroy the state, but to maintain their position of power. They don't want to lose that. And right now things aren't going well for them. And so they got a lot of other drama they have to deal with. And this is an election year coming up. Every person in the state House is going to be up for the state House of Representatives. They're going to be up for election. Half of the senators are going to be up for election. And they're concerned about the fact that we may actually have more accurate voter rolls and maybe a different type of election system where the mail-in voting is starting to get constrained or controlled different than it is now, or eliminated entirely. There's a potential for that. And they don't know then, if that happens, what those election results are going to be. It's not as easy to forecast based on past activity when you change those things. So we'll see. Let's see. Lancelot Dufresne. You have a question mark here. And it says, consider the jobs that do not require accountability. I don't know what that's referring to. Sorry. You might be going back and forth. And I don't know what that reference is, so I don't know how to answer that question. T.Z. Burton, Auburn just raised the sales tax 0.1% for this to get this criminal justice. Will all the cities circumvent state limits on raising property taxes to squander? Right now, I don't think so. I mean, I was actually surprised, but that is a tax proposal that died in the state legislature last cycle. It's kind of interesting because sales tax increases of 0.1% are probably the least abusive taxes that local government could propose to maybe support the criminal justice system a little bit better. But I'm going to tell you, Auburn could probably find that money somewhere else. So if they don't think they can, I'm happy to look at their budget and help them. And that is one of the things we're trying to do with local Doge Washington teams, is just look at these local state and county government budgets in detail, not their fake and phony baloney overview line item, but looking at line item expenditures and digging into how they spend their money. You can easily find that much money in a big city like Auburn that they can cut out of just the garbage they waste money on every day and not have to increase those taxes. Because every time you increase taxes, you change behavior, and you do start to make life harder to live in places like that. So that's how it goes. All right, I am trying to get to questions here, guys. There are plenty here, so I am not purposely skipping any questions. So somebody thought I was skipping questions last time, and I'm not. But and I want to show you this here. This is what I see when I'm looking at this, and you can see that there's just lots of questions here. So I am trying to go through this and catch the questions and not miss them. But sometimes as I'm going along, it's always possible that I might miss some. Let's go down here and see what the next question is. And this is, here's the question from B. York. 1983, any chance we could get Washington Supreme Court judges elected by districts and not statewide? What about state senators elected by county and not district? It might bring some sanity back. There's two issues there. And actually, you raise a really interesting question with Washington State Supreme Court elected by districts, because there's actually a pretty good argument to support creating the districts for the Supreme Court. Because of their own decisions that they made in determining district-only voting, and I believe it was Adam Pasco is where I remember that decision coming from. God, I can't remember. I don't think they did it in Yakima. I think it was Pasco. But anyway, they've kind of put themselves in a box, because if they're arguing that that's the only way to have localized representation, then by definition, they have a problem with how they're elected. I do believe that the legislature could also control that and could say that they should be elected by district. That'd be good. But no matter what, you still have to run legitimate candidates against the existing incumbents to make a change on the Supreme Court. And it has been rare and infrequent that anybody has ever done that. So we rarely have people running for these Supreme Court positions. We had one recently who got really close, 50,000 votes separation, but statewide out of millions cast. And again, there were easily 200,000 people in Washington State last year that didn't vote because they thought their vote didn't matter. And yet they would vote the same way you and I and most people watching this video would vote. So the stupidity of apathy and the way that it creates a highway for bad behavior in government is difficult and frustrating to deal with, but it's there. So then the senators are never going to be elected by county rather than district because the size of the counties are substantially different. You have essentially you have 49 Senate seats, which are legislative districts in Washington State, and you have 39 counties. There's no practical way to say that they could be elected by counties. There just isn't. And also, proportional representation, meaning one person, one vote, means that their districts need to be equivalent. This is why the fraud that the feds had under the census data last cycle in 2020, where they manipulated the math model, so that they falsified some of the census over and under counting to shift districts, congressional districts, into Democrat states and away from Republican states. That's why that's so pernicious and difficult to deal with, because if you start doing it at the state level, which I don't think we've had that much problem with that specific issue here. We've had some other issues that are sort of related to that, and part of it has to do with how you count illegals, and part of it has to do with other issues. But nevertheless, they still have to be equal, and that's why you're going to have districts like you do in Eastern Washington, where you have low population, so it spans multiple counties, and you have counties like King County where there's multiple districts inside of King County, and they never leave King County, so that's a bit of an issue. Barry Electronics, what would it take to roll back the gas tax? Great question. There are a couple of elements to it. The CCA, which is the Climate Commitment Act tax, is actually a wholesale tax, and it's baked in the cake as a tax increase before you don't see it reported as like a retail tax increase. That you could eliminate just by the state legislature. They could just vote it out. It's gone. There's no debt attached to it. It's wiped off and it's gone. Then you have the state taxes that are essentially like a sales tax for every gallon of gas that you buy. To roll those back, you would have to do it in sections, as far as I can tell. And it really has more to do with bonding and how much that money has been committed to pay off bonds for highway and freeway type construction. Unfortunately, Washington State has, of course, squandered and wasted a large percentage of those tax dollars on malinvestment in dumb projects like light rail and other things that the bonds are going to exist out there for some odd number of years. You could repeal some of them, and as the bonds are paid off, then those taxes go away. That's one of the ways you could do it. But it's interesting. I've gone down this road a couple times with legislators in the past who are more familiar with the gas tax specifically. But it is a one-way ratchet right now. And so we're paying like an extra 70 cents now, 60 cents a gallon on just a straight up gas tax, not including the CCA scam. CCA scam could go away pretty quickly. You'd hear lots of grifters and corrupt people scream about it, but that one could go away easily. Question here, Lancelot Dufresne, what happens if I don't pay? I don't know which one you're talking about not paying, but you pretty much get in trouble and they do come after you. So I don't see that you have many options to not pay, other than the fact that you can obviously go out of state and get gas from a state that doesn't have as much local taxes. You could probably do that if you live near the border. If you don't, you could always, I don't think this economically makes sense, but you could fill up a big 150-gallon tank of gas. I don't know, when you go to Idaho or Montana was cheaper than Idaho, so I guess you could fill it up and somehow run the math and think that driving that extra 150 pounds of weight all the way from wherever it is you are and the fuel that you're eating to bring it back home and the amount of money you're saving over time, maybe it would make sense if you had a pump on that. I don't know. I'm not sure when you go through all that makes sense. It's the same thing, though. There's people that run down to Oregon, right, to pick up big ticket items to avoid sales tax in Washington State. That's a common thing. And somebody mentioned Pete in here, just passing by. So Pete Serrano is acting Attorney General out of the Spokane office right now. I just don't know if he'll get an appointment to become a permanent one. We'll have to see. Disbelief in a corrupt system, ? Yeah, yes, many of us are skeptical. Bobby Blair, 5881, why do you not speak about the machines that count the votes? Good question. So I've been involved in more hand recounts than anybody who's watching this video. In fact, I've been involved in so many of them. I'm not totally sure how many I've been involved in, but it's a lot of them. I've been involved in hand recounts, and this is hand recounts. So clarification here. The election happened, the machines counted the votes, and now you're going back to those ballots and you're hand recounting those ballots. I've been involved in them for legislative seats. I've been involved with them for county-wide races. I've been involved with them with statistical sampling precinct counts to see if the machines were miscounting votes. I've done this more times than I can remember, well over 30 or 40 times for 15 years. So I'm going to tell you, I have been through this many times before. If you care about voter integrity, in our state, the machines are not where the problems are occurring. And they don't need to be, because the machines are not the biggest issue. Now, could you manipulate? I don't believe the machines are immune to manipulation. I think they are. However, when you go back and you do these hand recounts, you would catch, especially at the volume and times that we've done them, and we have had problems I've discovered, but they were relatively minor and we could explain them in most cases. There was a San Juan hand recount one time where it was off by 2 votes because the idiots that worked in their auditor's office couldn't find those 2 because of batch counting compared to precinct level counting. And that when I say idiots, they signed off on it even though it wasn't accurate. So, but it was off by 2. It wasn't going to change the outcome of that election, even if they were off by 2 in every single one of their precincts. However, what I have seen time and time again with organizing people doorbelling voter rolls is that and you got to put yourself in the position of somebody who'd want to do something nefarious. You can manipulate voting outcomes and elections by having bad voter rolls. It's one of the easiest ways to do it. They've been doing it for a long, long time, since the first concept of an election ever happened. If you have a way of manipulating who votes or how many times they can vote, then you have a way of influencing the outcome in a way that's much more less likely to get caught, more distributed, and Jesus Christ and his saints could be running your auditor's office, and you could still have dishonest election results, and there's nothing they would be able to see or do about it because these ballots would come in. I mean, this only really works, the corruption I'm talking about, it mostly only works in an all mail-in voting system because there's no chain of custody with these ballots that go out there. We actually have paper. You can go back and audit here. We're better than some states that are electronic voting, which I think is horrific because in-person electronic voting is garbage. There's no way to go back and actually vet that those machines are reporting everything. So if you want to focus on machines, go to states, including red states, that have machines there that do the counting and tabulation there. Being able to audit and verify that is a totally different animal. But the way we run ours, you can go back and look at the paper and count the ballots physically by hand and verify that the machine was accurate or not. It's not always perfect, but I'm going to tell you that's not where I found problems. Where I do find problems are in the voter rolls. I don't know why people don't want to look at these voter rolls. Probably because it's a lot harder. It's much more difficult to run down. The machines give you a magical ghost to kind of focus on and distract you from where the corruption and the problems I think are actually happening in the voting system. And it also allows outside interested parties to manipulate the process much easier away from all prying eyes and observers and everything else. And they don't have to potentially expose themselves to problems that I think we have uncovered in other states. In Washington state, the machines can be pristine perfection, and you could have widespread essentially vote fraud here and nobody be noticing it because it's all on the voter roll side or the manipulation of the ballots. And there's other things that go on. There's no one way to do this. I don't know why that's difficult for a lot of people to understand, but there's probably 40 ways to do bad things in an election system, and the machine's the least impactful one, at least the way we have it set up here right now. Other states, totally different story. So part of the reason why I don't talk about it so much is because I've actually spent a stunning amount of time digging into this for a long time, and that's not where I find the problem in our state. There's a little bit of an exception to this, and that's the OmniVote system that has recently been adopted in King County for rehabbing of ballots, and any kind of electronic voting that could potentially come through there is still a relatively small percentage of the votes and the ballots that come in any given jurisdiction, but it's horrific. It's a terrible idea. The whole thing should be banned and made illegal, but That's where we're at. Let's see. KJR Vincent. Do you think that the feds will pull the 70% federal funding that they currently give the Puget Sound Regional Council, since it's essentially a DEI organization? Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love it if they did, and I would support defunding them completely. And if 75% of their money comes from the feds, let's see if we can get that cut off. It's a great campaign to run on. Anything we can do to pull money out of King County or Seattle or Washington State in general, especially from the feds, is a great idea. I like that one. So thank you for bringing that one up. And I would do a whole campaign documenting the fact that they are a DEI organization. They promote that. Keep pushing that to the feds in every way you can. Even if you're just emailing out there, I think that kind of will help. By the way, I feel bad for you on Vashon Island. You're right. $5.89 is a ridiculous price for fuel. Vashon Island has always had fuel that was about $1.50 higher than the community around it. San Juan County to some extent as well. And that's just where it goes. Let's see. Here we go. Do we have any numbers? This is a question from Chase Trox A6420. Do we have any numbers on how many Washington residents have moved out of state in the last 10 to 20 years out of necessity? And I know many personally. We don't really have numbers on that. And part of the problem is that more people are moving into Washington than moving out. And that's still true right now. I don't believe that we've hit that tipping point yet. And so the numbers are kind of fudged and concealed inside of the immigration inflow and outflow. The state that actually loses the most, has some of the biggest churn is actually Florida. There's huge amounts of people that move out of Florida every year, but you have slightly more than that moving in. And so you have these big churns of movement. On average, for the last, I believe this is true for at least the last 60, 70 years, roughly 1% of the population moves every month, roughly. And so in a given year, you're going to have 10% of the population that's moved. Now, that's a little misleading. And this is true everywhere. It doesn't matter what state you're in. But it's a little misleading when you talk about that number, because what you actually is reflected in that number is some people moving multiple times, and they're just double and triple and quadruple counted. So you have some people that move a lot, and they account for probably a lot of that. And then some people that only move, like this is the one move they do a decade. But moving's very common, and it really goes back in this country for generations. The last 10 generations or so, moving is a common trait, right? You moved from another country to land in America. Your grandkids decide they want to move further inland. Then they want to move into the Ohio River Valley, and then they want to move to Wisconsin. Everybody's looking for the greener pastures, and they keep moving all around the country. I got family that moved here in the late 1800s, and in Washington State, and then others from another branch of the family that came here in the 1930s. Again, looking for, the next utopia, nirvana. And that's how it goes. I don't know those true numbers, and there's no way to know why they moved. You can try to do a survey, but there's just no real practical way. Most people are generally moving for financial reasons, though. They believe they have a better job somewhere. That's the dominant reason. Some people will then move because to be near family. That's a pretty common secondary reason. Sometimes you'll also have people moving just for retirement, right? They'll move because they've decided that they're downsizing and they need to move to a place that's a lot less expensive. That was why Florida and Arizona used to be good common places, snowbirds, that whole idea of living down there in the winter. That has happened. I think that's a little less popular now, but there's going to be people who move for all kinds of reasons. There's a lot of people that move into Washington. I meet people all the time that move here from somewhere else. So anyway, here's a funny, I'm going to read this comment just because I think it's funny. I just ran across this here. Mega Triumph 1, I bumped into corruption almost every time I visit government. Yes, you do. And I think that's probably true. Let's see. Let's keep going. I'm trying to find questions, guys. Sorry, I've been doing this a little bit longer than I was planning on, and you guys had a lot of great questions and a lot of people jumping on here. And I know we got Thanksgiving coming up in a couple days, and I actually have another video I'm going to record here at the studio tonight. So, Jason Fisher, 1530. Question, Battleground Public Schools is running a levy for the third time, and will it pass this time? statistically, if they've lost the previous 2 levies, the likelihood is they'll fail this one too. And it is somebody in Battleground needs to figure out why they keep losing and either fix the problems in that school district before they run the levy, or they're going to basically defeat themselves for a levy. Yelm just lost the 4th levy in a row, which at that point in time now the people will see their tax bill come in this next year with 38% lower property taxes. When the local levy fails, that's roughly what you end up paying less. That's a big change. People are not going to want to go back and pass a new levy after they just got property tax reduced by 38%. So, and that is what it's not the same every school district, but that's a big chunk of it. Here's another question here. I am a retired naval officer, want to get involved. This is from Harmonioki Cowboy. Want to get involved. How can I help? I can observe, knock on doors, etc. It really depends on where you live, and I can put you in touch with the people who live in your area that are organized and trying to do something. The knocking on doors is good. Working to dig through the budget in your county or city is actually better. The Doge Washington training that I do, and you don't need my training to do this. You could figure out how to do it on your own if you want. I just hope that I'm jump-starting people to get into this process quicker. But looking at how the money is squandered and spent where you live is actually a super productive, highly effective way to start to engage in local government and to fix some of what's broken, and to make yourself a little bit more prepared for what I think is going to be rough financial times in the future for a lot of people, and our state's no exception. What's your thoughts on C-Tram board being removed illegally by Skamania Sheriff? Ruled. I don't know. Oh, you mean board member being removed illegally? I'm not sure what you're actually asking there. So, Jason, please clarify. And if I can't get to it now, do it soon. I'm only going to take a couple more questions because I realize I've been doing this for an hour and a half, and usually I try to cut this off somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. This is from AC 7205. What's your take on the new Seattle mayor, and do you think that you can help her in any way? No, the new Seattle mayor is a clown show. Totally. We have found one of the least qualified people in Washington State, which is kind of amazing because we have a lot of unqualified people in government, and especially elected. And she is an exceptionally low quality, low experience, completely unqualified in every measurable way for almost anything in any job, really. And putting her in charge of Seattle seems to be the perfect thing for a socialist. She's been living, her parents have been helping her live. She's in her 40s. And I anticipate she's going to be a train wreck. But I also think it'll take about a year or so for her incompetence and bad policy ideas to truly start to have an impact in Seattle, just because I've always found it takes a little bit longer than you think. Everybody has this somehow vision that new administration comes in and they immediately hit the ground running. It is very rare and unusual to see that. Most of the time, there's a blurring between administrations. And even though previous mayoral administrations in Seattle have all been incompetent and disastrous, it takes a while for them to shrink the size of that government down and to trash it as much as she'll try in Seattle. But they've laid a good foundation for the destruction she's inevitably going to wage once she gets her little hot hands on whatever's left of the budget there and sees if she can find some way to drive more people out of Seattle and to make it more miserable to live there. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. As much as we'd love to have Glen Morgan be governor, you have to admit if we elected him governor now, he'd be inheriting the giant, most messed up, tallest place of political trash in Washington history. This is from AC 7205. Listen, I'm never going to run for governor. I have no interest in being governor. I'll tell you the job I've had, and many people watching the show have seen this before. I have one good job in government that I want, and only one. I want to be the guy that is the hatchet man for a Republican governor. I'm the guy you hire to come in and downsize the state agencies. I'd like to fire as many state workers and end as many state agencies as it's humanly possible to achieve in the shortest period of time possible, and downsize the abusive states so that we can eliminate a lot of the taxes and regulations that we don't need to live, in fact, that exist to hurt us and harm us and build up corruption in the state. Because even if you elect somebody good, if as long as they're willing to hire me, I can do all the hard work. They can blame me for everything, and I'm super happy to do it. And that'd be my dream job, really, in government, because I think that's really, really hard to do. And you'd have to be willing to go in and do it. And every state's going to have somebody like me coming in willing to do that. In our state, I've just spent the time to study the state government and the agencies for a long time now, so I think I'd be qualified enough to come in and do that, and I'd be very, very happy to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy elected. I don't need to be that guy who's elected can go and cut ribbons and make speeches, and I can be cutting in the background, and I'd be super, super happy to do that. So listen, guys, I'm going to basically call it a night. I've been an hour and a half at this. Lots of questions tonight, about 1,100 people, 1121 logged on, about 153 watching right this minute. So to the 153 watching, have a happy Thanksgiving, be with your family, focus on those issues. Don't hitch your happiness to the political class or politicians in general. That's always a mistake. Look around, be on good terms with your family, with your career, with your neighbors in your local community. That's where it matters. The everything else is really the crusade and the effort that we try to have to improve the environment in which we live. And we've got a lot of work in front of us, and whether you want to crawl into your bunker, hide in your hole or not, you can't stop it, but you can influence it, and we have to face reality. It's better than just sticking your head in the sand and pretending it's something else. I don't think you can even run away from this. I think it's coming no matter where you are, and there will be varying degrees of challenge. If you do live in a city, I'd recommend that you maybe not be in the city core and try to get a little ways away from that downtown disaster zone, but I'd be giving you that advice no matter what state you lived in. So I hope all's well. Enjoy Happy Thanksgiving. I know I'm looking forward to seeing family then and catching up with some relatives I haven't seen in a little while. I hope you are too. And I have other videos that I'll be launching, and one of them I think you might enjoy. It'll be a fun little short I'm going to put out in a couple days, and we'll see how much work I can actually get done before the night ends tonight. So hope all's well, and look forward to seeing everybody next time. And remember, the future does belong to those who show up.